He got out of bed, trying not to wake his sleeping wife, and quietly left the bedroom. The garage was cool. Antonio switched on the flashlight on his phone and walked over to Sophia's red Fiat. It was the one she was going to drive today to a meeting with suppliers in a coastal town. For 3 days, he had thoroughly studied the device of power steering, and now he knew exactly what to do. Antonio opened the hood and shone a flashlight on the power steering reservoir. The job wouldn't take more than 5 minutes. Rubber gloves wouldn't leave fingerprints. He loosened the clamp, removed the hose, and put an empty bottle in the bottle. The fluid flowed slowly but surely. The car will obey the steering wheel for about 20 kilometers. Then it will become heavier, and on the serpentine along the cliff, it will be impossible to steer, Antonio thought, watching the tank emptying. He remembered their last fight 3 days ago. Sophia had returned earlier than he had expected and caught him with Vanessa. The scandal had been ugly. Sophia had yelled that she knew about all his affairs, that she was sick of putting up with it, that she would file for divorce and sue him for half of everything he owned, including their joint restaurant business. You think I don't know how much you need my recipes? How you dream of getting full rights to the restaurant? You won't succeed at anything. I will destroy you, she shouted, hurling the vase at the wall. Sophia wasn't bluffing. She had proof of his financial manipulations. If it went to trial, he could lose not only his fortune, but his freedom as well. Antonio finished the job, put the hose back in place, and tightened the clamp. He looked around the engine compartment. Everything looked pristine. Closing the hood, he went back into the house and took a shower, washing away the smell of the garage. When he walked into the kitchen, Sophia was already making breakfast. "Good morning," he said, trying to keep his voice sounding natural. "Getting ready for your trip?" Sophia threw him a cold look. They had barely spoken since the scandal. "Yes, I need to sign contracts with new suppliers," she answered dryly, cracking eggs into the pan. "Why do you care?" "Just asking," Antonio shrugged, pouring himself some coffee. "Take care of yourself on the road, especially on the serpentine." Sophia was wary. Why the sudden concern? "Just that the news was talking about possible landslides after the rains," he lied. Half an hour later, Sophia left without even saying goodbye. Antonio heard the car start and went out onto the balcony. A red Fiat drove out of the yard and disappeared around the corner. He took a deep breath. The deed was done. All that remained was to wait. Antonio returned to the bedroom and took a suitcase out of the closet. In it were the plane tickets to Madrid, the perfect alibi. When news of the tragedy spread, he would be in another country for important negotiations. No one will suspect him. The police reports would read technical failure or loss of control on a wet road. Sophia drove the car, gripping the steering wheel tightly. The radio was playing some popular song, but she wasn't listening. Her thoughts were preoccupied with her impending divorce. She had already consulted a lawyer and knew she could get not only half of the assets, but also full rights to their restaurant business, which had started with her recipes and her talent. It had been 3 days since she had caught Antonio with that woman. Though, to be honest, she'd guessed it a long time ago. Too many late returns, strange phone calls, excuses. Sophia had put up with it because she loved him, because she believed it was temporary, but now the cup of her patience was overflowing. She left Lisbon and headed north along the coast. The road was almost empty. There was a challenging stretch ahead, a winding serpentine along a cliff, with cliffs on one side and the ocean on the other. Sophia slowed down as she entered the first turn. Something was wrong. The steering wheel felt unaccustomedly heavy. Sophia frowned and gripped it harder. At the second corner, it was even worse. The car went sideways. As she struggled to steady the car, she felt panic overwhelm her. "What's happening?" she whispered, struggling with the steering wheel on the third corner. The car was shifting inexorably toward the edge of the road. Sophia pressed the brake pedal to the floor, but it was too late. The Fiat smashed through the flimsy guardrail and flew off the cliff. Time slowed. Sophia saw the dark surface of the ocean approaching. The last thing she remembered before the impact was a glimpse of Antonio. He did something to the car. I know it's him. Then there was the impact, the darkness, the cold, and the endless fall into the void. João Silva cast his net in a familiar spot near the rocks. He had been fishing since childhood and knew these waters like the back of his hand. The weather was not bad, although the clouds on the horizon foretold rain. We had to hurry. Suddenly, he heard a noise in the distance and saw something red break through the guardrail on the serpentine and crash into the water. The old man's heart skipped a beat. He immediately turned the boat around and swam to the site of the fall. The car was already half submerged when he reached it. Acting on instinct, Joao dived in. The water was cold and murky, but he managed to open the door of the sinking car and pulled out the lifeless body of a young woman. After struggling to get her into the boat, he checked for a pulse. It was weak, but there was one. The woman was unconscious, with a deep gash on her head. Joao covered her with his jacket and steered the boat toward shore. It was too far to get to the hospital, and his village was a short walk away. Marta, a former nurse, lived there. She would help. Inspector Rui Costa arrived on the scene 2 hours after the call. By then, divers had already removed the car from the water, but the driver's body had not been found. The documents in the glove compartment identified the owner as Sofia Mendes, 30 years old, a resident of Lisbon. "What do we have?" Costa asked the young officer, taking notes. "No witnesses. A passing tourist noticed the broken guardrail and reported it to the police. There are no signs of braking on the road. Probably brake failure or the driver failed to control." Costa looked around the steep serpentine road, a difficult place even for an experienced driver. But the absence of the body bothered him. The ocean could have carried it far away, or it could have gotten stuck among the underwater rocks. Organize a search operation along the coast and contact the husband. When Sofia opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was an unfamiliar wooden ceiling. Her head was splitting with pain. She tried to sit up and immediately felt dizzy. "Easy, easy," she heard a woman's voice say. "You need to lie down." An elderly woman with a kind, wrinkled face sat in front of her. She soaked a rag in a bowl of water and applied it to her forehead. "Where am I?" she whispered with parched lips. "In the fishing village of Azenha do Mar. Joao found you in the sea. Your car fell off a cliff." Sofia tried to remember, but her mind was blank. No car, no cliff, no own name. "Yeah, I don't remember," she said with horror. The woman looked at her sympathetically. "It's from hitting your head. I'm Martha, a former nurse. You have a severe concussion. Your memory may come back in time." "And what's my name?" Sofia asked, feeling panic rising. Martha and the gray-haired man with a weathered face who appeared in the doorway exchanged glances. "We don't know," the man replied. "I'm Joao. I'm the one who pulled you out of the water. You didn't have any identification on you." Sofia closed her eyes, trying to deal with the panic. Who was she? Where did she come from? Did she have any family? Why couldn't she remember anything? "You need to go to the hospital," Martha said. "But the nearest one is 60 kilometers away, and Joao doesn't have a car." "I can take you tomorrow by boat to Setúbal, then a bus from there," Joao offered. Sofia tried again to remember anything, but her memory refused to come back. A strange feeling told her that she would probably only get worse in the hospital. "No," she said firmly. "I'll stay here if you'll let me, at least for a few days." Joao and Marta looked at each other again. "Of course," Joao nodded. "Rest as long as you need." "What should we call you?" Marta asked. Sofia thought for a moment. "Call me Maria." Antonio Mendes found out what had happened when his plane landed in Madrid. A call from the police caught him at the airport. He feigned shock and immediately flew back to Lisbon. 5 hours after the accident, he was already giving a statement to Inspector Costa. "When was the last time you saw your wife?" Costa asked, watching Antonio's reaction carefully. "This morning. She went to a meeting with suppliers," the man replied, carefully feigning sorrow. "We own a chain of restaurants, and Sofia is in charge of sourcing the food." "Did your wife have any problems? Enemies? Maybe she talked about suicide?" Antonio shook his head. "No, nothing like that." "And what was your relationship like?" Antonio froze for a moment. Could it be that Costa suspected something? No, he couldn't be. How would he know about the quarrel? "We had a great relationship," he lied. "We were planning to open a new restaurant." Costa made a note in his notebook. Your wife's car was checked 2 weeks ago. No technical problems were found. Perhaps she didn't handle the steering? The road there is difficult. Perhaps, Costa nodded. But what worries me is the lack of a body. The search operation is continuing, but so far to no avail. The search continued for a week. Divers surveyed the seabed, rescuers combed the coast. No trace of Sofia Mendez has been found. Antonio ordered a lavish wake, which was attended by dozens of people. He was inconsolable, accepting condolences, talking about how much he loved his wife. With all his appearance, he portrayed a grieving widower. But Inspector Costa was not satisfied. Something was bothering him. He dug into the couple's past, interviewed their friends and colleagues. From a waitress at their restaurant, he learned of the couple's recent tensions. From a friend of Sofia, Luisa Pereira, about some suspicions about Antonio's fidelity. But there was no evidence of her husband's involvement in the accident. A month after Sofia's disappearance, Antonio filed a petition to have her declared dead. Usually such procedures took years, but given the circumstances of the accident and the lack of any real chance of survival, the process was expedited. And in a small fishing village 60 kilometers from the site of the tragedy, a woman who called herself Maria gradually recovered. She helped Joao with fishing, cooked meals, and made friends with the locals. No one questioned her about her past. In places like this, they respect other people's secrets. Sometimes at night she had strange dreams, a big city, a restaurant kitchen, a man without a face. But in the morning, everything faded from her memory again. A year after Sofia Mendez disappeared, the case was officially closed. Her body was never found, but she was declared dead. Antonio Mendez became sole owner of their restaurant business and all their property. Inspector Costa was forced to sign the accident report, although his doubts never left him. But without proof, there was nothing he could do. "The truth will come out someday, Señor Mendez," he said in parting, shaking Antonio's hand. "It always comes out." Antonio smiled. "I'm afraid, Inspector, in this case the truth is forever at the bottom of the ocean." The coastal sun was casting light into the small kitchen of Joao's tavern. Maria, as everyone had grown accustomed to calling her over the past 4 years, was deftly chopping fresh vegetables for soup. Her hands moved with the confidence and skill of someone for whom cooking had become second nature. She purred some tune, vaguely familiar but the name of which she couldn't remember, like so much else from her past. "Maria, we're having a full house tonight." Joao, the gray-haired fisherman who had become almost a father figure to her, entered the kitchen. "A group of tourists from Lisbon are coming. They say it's especially for your fish chowder." Maria smiled. Their little tavern in the fishing village of Azenha do Mar had gone from being a humble establishment for locals to a place where visitors from out of town came especially to visit over the past 3 years. It all started the day she stood at the stove for the first time to thank Joao and his friends for rescuing and sheltering her. "Cooking is like breathing," she said then, amazed at how naturally her hands chopped the onions, seasoned the fish, and how unmistakably she knew how long to keep the dish on the fire. The memory of the body retained what the memory of the mind could not. Recipes came to her in her dreams. Sometimes she would wake up in the middle of the night with a clear understanding of how to prepare a dish she had never cooked in this new life. Maria wrote everything down in a small notebook Martha had given her. "I think you were a cook in a previous life," Joao had often told her, "and a very good one." Joao never questioned her about her past, never insisted she go to the police or the hospital. He simply accepted her for who she was, a woman with no past but a talent for turning simple ingredients into culinary masterpieces. "Let's make them a feast," Maria nodded, returning to the slicing. "They brought in some great shrimp this morning." "I knew you'd say that." Joao smiled and went out to check the wine supply. Maria continued cooking, immersing herself in the familiar rhythm of the kitchen. It calmed her, gave her a sense of control that was sorely lacking in a life where much of her own history remained inaccessible, however. Something had begun to change over the last year. More and more often, she had vivid dreams in which she saw a large, professional kitchen, heard the shouts of the cooks, smelled the smells of exquisite dishes, and a man's face that always eluded her when she tried to get a closer look at it. Last night's dream had been particularly vivid. She saw herself in some kitchen, preparing a complicated dish. There was a man standing next to her. She could feel his presence, but his face remained blurred. He was saying something about a new restaurant, about expanding the business, calling her by a name other than Maria, by another name she couldn't remember waking up. Maria shook her head, pushing the memories away. Right now, she needed to focus on preparing for the influx of guests. Lately, her culinary creations were attracting more and more people from Lisbon and beyond. Someone had posted a rave review on a travel blog, and now Joao's tavern was a local landmark. By late afternoon, the tavern was filled with people. Laughter sounded, glasses clinked, and the air was filled with the aromas of seafood and spices. Maria looked out of the kitchen into the hall. Joao, with the help of 2 local boys, was barely coping with the flood of orders. "The author of that blog is here," Joao announced, popping into the kitchen for another portion. "He asks me to personally thank the cook." Maria looked embarrassed. She rarely went out into the hall, preferring to stay in the kitchen. Contact with strangers from the larger world made her inexplicably uneasy. "Maybe tomorrow?" She tried to evade. "He's leaving early in the morning," Joao insisted. "Just go out for a minute. It's good for you to socialize with people." Maria reluctantly wiped her hands and stepped out into the hall. At a table by the window sat a young man with a neat beard and smiled welcomingly when he saw her. "Maria, finally, I'm Paulo Santos, author of the blog Flavors of Portugal. Your fish chowder is a revelation. I've been looking everywhere for a similar flavor, but I've only found it here. Is it an old family recipe?" Maria smiled embarrassedly. "Thank you for your kind words. The recipe just came to me. Such a talent. You should open a restaurant in Lisbon. There, people will pay 10 times as much for such dishes." "I'm fine here," Maria replied. "I recently wrote about the new Sofia restaurant chain in Lisbon," Paulo continued. "Very popular place, but your authenticity isn't there. Everything is too commercialized." At the mention of the name Sofia, Maria suddenly felt dizzy. Some memory flashed before her eyes, a glass shattering against the wall, shouting, anger. She staggered back and grabbed the edge of the table. "Are you feeling ill?" Paulo asked worriedly. "Just tired," she smiled weakly. "Excuse me, I need to get back to the kitchen." At night, she dreamed again. This time she saw a man enter the bedroom. He thought she was asleep and slipped quietly out the door. She followed him and saw him doing something to a car in the garage. A red car, her car. The dream was so vivid that Maria woke up in a cold sweat. This was no ordinary dream. It was a memory. A week after the blogger's visit, Maria decided to do something she had been putting off for a long time. She asked Joao to take her to Lisbon. "Why?" he wondered. "You don't like big cities." "I need to," she replied simply. "I feel like I'll be able to remember there." Joao looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, but I'll go with you." They set off early in the morning in Marta's old pickup truck. On the way, Maria told Joao about her dreams, the scrappy memories that began to come to her more and more often. "I think my name isn't Maria," she said quietly. "I'm called by a different name in my dreams. And I remember a man, husband. He did something to my car before the accident. Joao, I'm beginning to think it wasn't an accident." Joao gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Are you sure you want to dig into this? Sometimes the past is best left in the past. I need to know the truth." In Lisbon, they stayed with a distant relative of Joao's who kept a small guest house on the outskirts. The elderly woman didn't ask too many questions, just offered them rooms and a fresh breakfast. The next day, Maria set out for the city center. She didn't know where exactly to go, relying on intuition and scraps of memories. Something told her to start in the neighborhoods where the restaurants were located. If she really was a chef, perhaps she worked in one of them. She wandered the streets, looking into the faces of passers-by, scrutinizing the signs. Some places seemed vaguely familiar, but no specific memories came to mind. By noon, tired and frustrated, she stopped in front of a modern restaurant with a sign that read, Sofia. Her heart skipped a beat. The name from the blogger's dream. Maria stepped inside. The interior was elegant and modern, white tablecloths, minimalist dishes, dim lighting. She sat down at a table and ordered the day's menu. When her food arrived, she felt a strange sense of déjà vu. The fish dish was prepared almost exactly as she had cooked it at Joao's tavern, but with a few differences. The sauce was slightly different, the spices used in different proportions, but the base was definitely her recipe. "You like it?" asked the waiter who approached, seeing how closely she was scrutinizing the dish. "Very much," replied Maria. "Tell me, who owns this restaurant?" "Oh, it's Señor Mendez's chain of restaurants. He has 5 establishments in Lisbon and 2 in Porto. They say there's another one opening soon in Madrid." Mendez. The name echoed with a pain in my temples. "And the recipes? Who developed them? You must have read about it?" "Señor Mendez's story is quite famous. His wife was a brilliant cook, but she died in a car accident 5 years ago. He kept her recipes and opened a chain of restaurants in her honor. Sofia. That was her name. Sofia. Maria. Sofia Mendez." Memories came like a tidal wave. The kitchen of their first restaurant, the quarrels with her husband, his cheating, the last terrible fight when she threatened divorce and demanded half of the fortune. "Are you all right?" the waiter asked worriedly, seeing the pale face of the customer. "Yes, just dizzy. Does Señor Mendez come here often?" "At this restaurant? Fridays, usually. Today is Friday. He should stop by. He's busy preparing for his wedding right now, so it's a busy schedule." "Wedding?" "Yes. He's marrying the daughter of the wine magnate Roche. Big event. It was in all the papers." Maria paid and quickly left the restaurant. She needed time to realize everything. She was Sofia Mendez, the presumed dead wife of a successful restaurateur. Her husband used her recipes to build an empire, and now he's about to marry someone else. He also may have tried to kill her. Back at the guest house, she told Joao everything. The old fisherman listened in silence, shaking his head from time to time. "What are you going to do?" he asked when she had finished. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "Part of me wants to just go back to the village and continue living like Maria. The other part demands truth and justice, but I'm afraid. If he really did try to kill me, then what's to stop him from doing it again?" Joao was silent for a long time, then he said, "You need proof, and you need to be careful. This man is rich and powerful." The next day, Sofia, she was beginning to think of herself by that name again, went to Sofia's restaurant again. She sat in the cafe opposite, where she had a good view of the entrance toward evening. An expensive black car pulled up to the restaurant. Sofia's heart beat faster. Antonio. She recognized him at once, although he had changed a little over the years. There was gray in his hair. His face had become a little fuller. Next to him was an elegant young woman, must be his fiancée. Sofia watched as they entered the restaurant, as they were greeted with reverence, as the waiters bustled around. A strange feeling swept over her, not hatred, not anger, but a kind of detachment. This man, once the center of her life, now seemed alien. The only thing she wanted was to understand why he had tried to kill her. Each night she dreamed more and more clearly. She remembered their first meeting, their first restaurant together, how the relationship had gradually deteriorated, how Antonio had become more and more interested in money and status, rather than the quality of the food and the happiness of the customers. She remembered how she caught him with his mistress, how she threatened divorce, how he begged her to forgive him. And then came the most terrible memory. Early morning, she pretends to be asleep. Antonio quietly gets up and goes out. She, driven by suspicion, follows him, and through the ajar door of the garage sees him doing something to her car, draining the fluid from the power steering reservoir. She doesn't understand the technical side, but clearly remembers his focused face, the rubber gloves on his hands, the empty bottle into which the fluid was draining. Sofia woke up in a cold sweat. There was no longer any doubt. Antonio was trying to kill her, and had almost succeeded. On her third day in Lisbon, she decided to take the risky step of finding the policeman who was handling her case. From conversations with waiters, she learned his name, Inspector Rui Costa. It turned out that he was still working for the police, although he was due to retire soon. Sofia did not dare to go directly to the police station. Instead, she found the address of a cafe where, according to the waiter at Sofia's, the inspector often had breakfast. And indeed, the next morning she saw a gray-haired man with a tired but penetrating look at a corner table. Inspector Costa? She asked, walking up to him. Yes? He raised a questioning look at her. May I have a word with you? It concerns the Sofia Mendez case. Interest flashed in his eyes. He gestured for her to sit down. Are you a relative? No. Sofia hesitated. Should she tell the truth? But would he believe her without proof? Yeah, I have information that her death may not have been an accident. Costa looked at her carefully. That's a serious statement. What information do you have, and why are you only coming forward with it now, 5 years later? It's hard to explain. Sofia felt her plan crumbling. She hadn't thought this conversation through well enough. Tell me, do you believe Antonio Mendez could have been involved in his wife's death? Costa set his fork aside. I had my suspicions, but no proof. Why do you ask? Because I know what he did. He drained the power steering fluid from her car's power steering. That's why she lost control on the Serpentine. How do you know that? Costa's eyes narrowed. Sofia realized she'd said too much. I can't say. Not yet. But I want to help you find proof. Without concrete information, there's nothing I can do. The case has been closed for 4 years. Sofia nodded and stood up. I understand. Thank you for your time. Hold on. Costa held out a business card to her. If you have anything specific, give me a call. This case has always bothered me. Back at the guest house, Sofia found a worried Joao. You should be more careful. Our house is being watched. What? Who? Some man in an expensive car. The landlady said he was asking about us. Sofia got a chill inside. Had Antonio really found out about her? But how? She'd been so careful. Or was she? Maybe someone in the restaurant recognized her, despite her changed appearance? Maybe her questions had attracted attention? We need to leave, Joao said firmly. Immediately. They packed their bags and left the guest house through the back door. The landlady, a relative of Joao's, promised to tell the observer that they had left in the morning for another town. On the way to the village, Sofia was silent. Immersed in thought, she had learned the truth. But what should she do with that knowledge? Make a public statement? But without proof, no one would believe Antonio had tried to kill her. Plus, he'd probably portray her as a lunatic or a fraud. He's rich and powerful. He has connections. Joao, she finally said, I don't want to go back to my old life, and I don't want revenge, but I also can't let him get away with it. He tried to kill me and almost succeeded. What if he does it to someone else? Joao nodded. Then we need a plan and proof. Back in the village, Sofia continued working at the tavern, but now she knew who she was. The memory had fully returned, bringing with it both the pain of the past and the understanding of the present. She was Sofia Mendez, the wife of the man who had tried to kill her for money and freedom, and now she had to decide what to do with that knowledge. One evening, when the tavern was already empty and she and Joao were clearing the tables, he asked, Do you miss your old life? Sofia thought for a moment. Sometimes, I miss the big professional kitchen, the opportunity to create complex dishes, but I don't miss my marriage to Antonio. Now that my memory has returned, I realize that the last years with him were filled with lies and disappointment. Here, with you, with the locals, I have gained something I never had there, a real family. Joao smiled, but his eyes remained serious. And yet you can't be truly free until the truth comes out. Sofia knew he was right. She had to find a way to prove Antonio's guilt without putting herself in danger. And she began to form a plan. And in a luxurious penthouse in the center of Lisbon, Antonio Mendez was looking at photos on his laptop. They showed a woman who looked a lot like his late wife, only with shorter hair and more tanned skin. She was coming out of his restaurant, sitting in a cafe across the street talking to Inspector Costa. That's impossible, he muttered, feeling a chill run down his back. She's dead. She must be dead. But the pictures said otherwise. Sofia, his wife whom he'd pushed off a cliff 5 years ago, had somehow survived. And now, she was back. It had been 2 months since the trip to Lisbon. Sofia, she now called herself only by that name in her thoughts, continued to work at Joao's tavern, but part of her mind kept returning to what she had learned. The memories had fully recovered, and with them came a realization. She couldn't just go on with her life knowing that the man who had tried to kill her had not only gone unpunished, but was thriving, using her recipes and building an entire empire with them. "I need to go to Lisbon again," she announced one evening. João frowned. "Are you sure you were hunted down last time?" "I'll be more careful, and I have a plan." The plan was simple and risky at the same time. Lisbon's annual gastronomic festival attracted chefs from all over Portugal. Anyone could register to participate. Sofia registered under the name Maria Silva, listing João's tavern as her place of business. This gave her a legitimate reason to be in town and a chance to act openly. "Antonio never misses this festival," she explained to João. "The Sofia restaurants are always represented there. This is my chance." "A chance for what? For revenge?" Sofia shook her head. "For justice." On the first day of the festival, Sofia set up her humble tent among dozens of others. She had brought only the simplest of dishes from the tavern, a fish chowder she'd made from the freshest seafood João had brought in earlier that morning, and a fig tart from a recipe that had come to her in a dream many months ago. The neighboring tents were much more luxurious, with professional equipment and entire teams of cooks. But soon a line began to form outside Maria Silva's humble tent. Something about her simple dishes attracted people, the authenticity, the soul put into each portion. By noon, an elegant woman with a notebook, a journalist from a culinary publication, approached her. "These flavors, they remind me of Sofia restaurants, but there's something special here," she said, tasting the chowder. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" "They're old recipes," Sofia answered evasively. "They've been with me forever." The journalist took some photos and promised to write an article. Sofia didn't give it much thought, but the next day, her tent attracted even more visitors. Many mentioned an article in an online publication comparing her dishes to Sofia's restaurants, but calling them more authentic, with that spark that seems to have disappeared from Señor Mendez's chain. By the evening of the second day, Sofia noticed a familiar face in the crowd. Luisa, her old friend and colleague from the first restaurant she and Antonio had opened. Sofia instinctively turned away, but it was too late. Luisa was already heading towards the tent, attracted by the queue and the chatter of the people around her. Luisa ordered a portion of chowder and watched Sofia carefully as she cooked. When their eyes met, Sofia saw her friend turn pale, recognizing her despite her new hairstyle and tanned skin. "It can't be," Louise whispered. "Sofia?" Sofia put a finger to her lips and nodded her way out of the pavilion. 5 minutes later, they were sitting on a bench in a small square next to the exhibition center. "How is this possible?" Louise was still in shock. "Everyone thinks you're dead. Antonio. He tried to kill me," Sofia said quietly. "Drained the power steering fluid before my trip down the Serpentine. The car went off the road. I was rescued by a fisherman, but I lost my memory. Only recently remembered everything." Louise listened, eyes wide. "My God. I always felt something was wrong with that accident. Antonio recovered too quickly, and those restaurants." "Tell me about the restaurants," Sofia asked. "After your death, he inherited everything, the restaurant and the recipes. 6 months later, he opened a second one, naming the chain after you. Now he has 7 restaurants. He uses your recipes, your techniques. He says it's a tribute to your memory. But really, in reality, he's always been jealous of my success," Sofia finished. "He couldn't create anything on his own, so he appropriated mine. And not just a culinary legacy," Louise added. "He's about to marry Isabel Rocha. Her father owns the largest winehouse in the country. Antonio is vying for a seat on the board of directors." Sofia shook her head. "Always money and status. Nothing has changed." "What are you going to do?" Louise asked. "Are you going to make yourself known? It will be a sensation. A widow rising from the dead?" "No," said Sofia firmly. "I can't just declare myself. I have no proof that he tried to kill me. It'll be my word against his. Besides, legally I've been declared dead. It's a complicated process to prove I'm alive. And Antonio will do anything to discredit me, maybe even try to finish what he started." "Then why are you here? Why take the risk?" Sofia looked her friend in the eye. "Because I want justice, not revenge, justice." They talked for another hour. Sofia talked about her life in the fishing village, about João, about how her memory was slowly coming back to her. Luisa shared the events of the last 5 years. She had left the restaurant shortly after Sophia's death, unable to work with Antonio, and had opened her own small pastry shop. Before parting, Sophia asked a favor. "Do you know Inspector Costa, the one who handled my case?" "Yes, of course. He came by a few times, asking questions about Antonio." "I need you to contact him anonymously. Tell him that Sofia Mendez is alive and will be at the festival on the last day. Tell him she has evidence against her husband." Louise frowned. "But you have no proof." Sophia smiled enigmatically. "Not yet." On the third day of the festival, Sophia noticed Inspector Costa walking between the tents. He stopped at each one, sampling the food, but his gaze kept wandering through the crowd as if he was looking for someone. In the middle of the afternoon, the journalist who had interviewed her earlier returned with a man in an expensive suit. "Senora Silva, this is Antonio Mendez, the owner of the Sofia restaurant chain. He was so impressed with the reviews of your cuisine that he wanted to try it in person." Sophia froze. This was it, the moment she had been both waiting for and dreading. Antonio stood before her, so familiar and so foreign. She lowered her eyes, trying not to meet his gaze, and silently prepared a batch of chowder. "Amazing," Antonio said, tasting it. "It reminds me of... Where did you get this recipe from?" "Family," Sophia replied briefly, still not looking up. "Interesting," his voice became strained, "because it's very similar to my late wife's signature recipe. So similar, in fact, that I'd say this is the one." Sophia finally raised her eyes and looked at him. "Perhaps we have a similar approach to cooking?" Their gazes met. Sophia saw Antonio's pupils dilate with shock as he took a step back as if he'd seen a ghost. "It's impossible," he whispered. "You're dead?" she finished quietly. "You must be mistaken, Senor Mendez. My name is Maria Silva, and I am from the fishing village of Azeña do Mar." But she saw in his eyes that he recognized her. Antonio quickly apologized and left, leaving the unfinished chowder behind. Sophia noticed him pull out his cell phone, hastily dialing someone's number. An hour later, Joao, who had been watching from the sidelines, approached her. "There are two men watching the tent. I think they are Antonio's men." Sophia nodded. "I expected that. The last part of the plan begins tonight." The plan was risky. Sophia knew that Antonio wouldn't leave her alone after the meeting. He had to try to contact her, find out how she survived, and most importantly, what she was going to do with her knowledge. As the festival closed in the evening, Sophia deliberately stayed late, pretending to tidy up the tent. Joao and Luisa, following the plan, left early but stayed nearby. The pavilion became quiet, most of the participants having dispersed. Sophia was almost certain that Antonio would come. The risk of leaving her out was too great for him, and indeed, she soon heard footsteps. "I knew it was you." His voice made her wince. "How did you survive?" Sophia turned around slowly. Antonio was standing a few meters away from her, alone, unguarded. That was a good thing. There should be no witnesses, at least no visible witnesses. "I was rescued by a fisherman," she replied calmly. "Pulled me out of a sinking car. I've lost my memory, Antonio. Only recently remembered who I was, and what you did." His face contorted with fear for a moment, but he quickly pulled himself together. "I didn't do anything. It was an accident. And all these years I've kept the memory of you alive." "Using my recipes to get rich?" "I was doing it in your honor." Sophia shook her head. "I saw you, Antonio, the morning before the accident. You thought I was asleep, but I woke up and followed you into the garage. I saw you draining the power steering fluid." Antonio turned pale. "You're delusional. You must have been dreaming because of your head injury." "We both know the truth." Sophia stepped toward him. "You tried to kill me because I caught you with your mistress and threatened divorce. I demanded half the fortune and full prescription rights. You chose to get rid of me. And what are you going to do about it? You have no proof. You've been officially declared dead. Legally, you're a nobody." Sophia stepped even closer. "I'm not here for revenge or to demand anything back. I only want to know one thing. Why? Was money and this woman more important than our marriage, our history?" Antonio grinned. "And you haven't changed at all, Sophia. Still the same naive idealist. Yes, money was more important. And freedom from your eternal reproaches, from your superiority in the kitchen, from always having to be in your shadow. Is that what this is about, envy? I created recipes and you were jealous? I created the business, he almost shouted. I turned one little restaurant into an empire. Yes, I used your recipes, but without my business sense, they'd still be one tiny establishment. And you should have killed me for that? You left me no choice. Half of everything, Antonio. I would destroy you, Antonio, he taunted. You would destroy everything I was building. Sophia caught his gaze. You just admitted to attempted murder. I can go to the police. Antonio laughed. Word against word. And me, a respected businessman, against a woman who claims to be my dead wife. Who do you think will be believed? And if I have a recording of this conversation? Antonio's face froze. You're bluffing. Sophia silently pulled a small tape recorder from her pocket. The recording clearly sounded his confession. You wouldn't dare. His voice trembled. I will find you. Threats again, Antonio? Came a voice from the darkness. Inspector Costa stepped into the light, holding his police badge in his hand. I think we have something to talk about at the station. 2 more police officers appeared from the shadows. Sophia saw the shock and impotent rage on Antonio's face as his license was read to him and he was handcuffed. Senora Mendez, Costa turned to her. We're going to need your testimony, and I think you'll have to prove your identity. It's not going to be an easy process. I'm ready, Sophia nodded. I'm ready for anything now. The following weeks were a maelstrom of events. A DNA test confirmed Sophia's identity. Antonio went on trial for attempted murder. Journalists besieged Sophia, demanding interviews. The story of a resurrected wife who had lived for years without memory in a fishing village while her husband profited from her prescriptions had become a sensation. The process of regaining legal status was long and complicated, but Sophia did not demand the return of property or rights to Sophia's restaurants. Instead, she demanded only fair recognition of her authorship of the recipes and solid compensation. I don't want to go back in time, she explained to Louise when she asked why she wasn't fighting for the restaurants. I have a different life now, and I like it. That new life included Joao's Tavern, now Sophia and Joao's Tavern, which they began renovating with a portion of the compensation they received. The plan was to expand, hire staff, but no franchises or chains. Sophia wanted to maintain the authenticity and soulfulness of the small establishment, where every dish was prepared with love and attention. Antonio was found guilty and given a lengthy sentence for attempted murder. His business empire shaken by the scandal, several restaurants closed, but some continued to operate under a new team, now honestly listing Sophia Mendez as the author of the recipes. On the last day of the trial, as Antonio was led away in handcuffs, he cast a look of hatred and incomprehension at Sophia. She responded with a calm gaze in which there was neither triumph nor gloating, only relief that justice had finally been served. Back in Azenya do Mar, Sophia felt completely free of the past for the first time in years. Standing on the ocean beside Joao, she watched the sunset and thought about the strange twist of fate that had nearly killed her, but had ultimately led to a new, happier life. You know, Joao said, as if reading her thoughts, sometimes you have to fall off a cliff to realize where your path really lies. Sophia smiled and nodded. She had been through the fall, through oblivion, through awakening, and now, at last, she found peace and her true place in the world. Not as the shadow of Antonio Mendez, not as a ghost of the past, but as Sophia, cook and co-owner of a small tavern in a fishing village where every day brought the simple joy and satisfaction of a well-prepared meal and the grateful smiles of customers. The waves crashed gently against the coastal rocks. Life went on, and now it was her life, a real life, free from fear and lies, full of new opportunities and plans for a future she could choose and build as she saw fit.